What's up, guys? Just out here in the shop picking away on the SquareBody project. So I guess we got to come up with a game plan. So I'll show you how I'm going to approach this. So in a project like this, there's a lot going on. You got an LS swap, so you got a fuel injected engine, you got an electronically controlled transmission, you have add-ons like electric cooling fan, so you got to wire up power and ground and the relay to run all this and the control. You have the harness for the engine and the transmission, right? So basically, that's over here. So Sean's already had Dario kind of help him out. So Dario's already gone through and removed all the non-essential stuff. So we just have the bare bones of what the LS harness needs to run. However, we still need to A, tie that into the main body harness, and B, we also are probably going to modify this so that we can hide a bunch of this harness. You know, I'll show you when we get to the intake manifold. I'll probably tuck it under the intake instead of around on the outside just to make it look neat and tidy. So we have to do two things. We're going to modify this so it looks pretty on the engine for our application specifically, and we have to tie this into the main body harness. The main harness is also going to have to account for not only the cooling fan up front, and we have a compressor here, engine-driven compressor for the air, but we're going to also have to account for things like this, right? So Sean got a cab mount light, so it's a cargo light and a high mount brake light. So we're going to have to swap out the wiring because we have another feed going into this and then integrate that. So that's a minor kind of thing, but that's still something that has to be done on the cab. Out back, I've already removed most of the stuff that was in here, and we're going to have to not only run the harness for the taillights and backup lights and signal lights out here, but we're going to also have to run, you know, how we want to power up this backup air compressor, right? Is it going to be running at the same time as the engine driven, or is it going to be an on-off switch as emergency backup? So we've got to figure that out because that's going to change what we run out to the back with wiring. We also got to incorporate our wiring for the valve block, right? So there's a harness that's going to go to and from this. That's over here. We got to wire that so that we can control the air. We have a pressure switch off the tank that we need to get wired into that engine-driven compressor. And then we're going to have our remote mount battery over here. So we're going to have power and ground going to the frame. That goes up front to the starter. We're going to have to run the power distribution. We're also going to have to go through and install our new body harness, chassis harness, right? So this is going to go into the cab. So we're going to mount this. We've got to sort through all the stuff that we don't need and then tie in all the other stuff that's on the chassis into this harness as well as route it. At the same time, we're also going to try to not have any of that stuff clutter up our firewall. So we're going to want to run the harness, you know, out of the cab in an area that is nice and hidden, right? So probably behind a fender. And then the harness is going to run through the back of this fender here. So between the inner fender and the fender itself, and then kind of underneath on the inside of the rad support, right? That takes time and effort and planning because we want this to be nice and pretty and presentable as well as functional as possible. So, let's get it going. So let's figure out what's in the box. So here's our harness. This is our interior light, it looks like. There is the cargo light slash high mount. That just goes into the normal bulb socket. That's a dual filament so that it has a separate feed for the cargo as well as the brake. Maybe we'll bench test that so we see what we got going on. There's the on-off switch for the cargo light. Oh, Sean's got a new one. Perfect. There's the cargo light itself. Nice chrome, clear lens. Interior light, got to be billet, of course. Sean likes shiny. All-American billet. Knob for something. Billet knob. Old housing. Screws. Cool. I'm going to go out on a limb here because we don't have a schematic or any instructions with this thing as to how it's wired. I'm not quite sure right now about the red and the white wires. However, I'm going to treat the socket as I would a normal bulb. So the outside of the housing would be ground, and then that would mean power would come in here as a normal light, and that should illuminate either circuit. So we don't have that. So that means we got circuitry going in. So that means the red and white would be power and ground, I'm going to assume. And then these would be the inputs into the module. There's got to be a module inside this thing. And that would turn on either the cargo light or the brake light. I don't want to let the smoke out of this thing because I'm not going to buy Sean a new one. Found a wiring schematic for the Speedway brake light, high mount light. So the white wire is loose white wire, should be 12 negative. This one here should be our brake input to the red wire. And then I'm going to say we need negative also to there. I guess that's going to be to the harness itself. Let's double check some wiring before I just nuke the LED. Okay. Black is negative off the socket, and the white is positive. So I'm going to go interpret that to meaning the two terminals. So if I take my positive and negative, we're going to go to these terminals here. No? No bueno? It just says cargo light plug, white is 12 volt positive, black is 12 volt negative. I also don't know if this wire needs to be hooked up while we're hooking up power to these things. No? So if I look at the socket here, I'm assuming that the housing is a negative. So if that's the case, then I should end up with some continuity to the connectors, or one of these connectors, whichever is negative. So nothing there, nothing there. Maybe it's not. Maybe the continuity is only to the terminals. Housing, nothing, nothing. We can't go continuity on there. Maybe we can see something on diode test. Which I don't know that we can, because I think there There's too much stuff going on in here. So found another wiring schematic that says the white off the connector here is going to be our ground, and then the black would be power in. There we go. Cool. So if that's the case, white is ground. I'm going to say that that goes that way there. So when we go to this connector, should be able to put that in there. Here, let's do it this way. There. Here's your cargo light. Just going to make some notes here for our cargo light. Let's start piecing this puzzle together so we can get this installed and the cab harness. We also got to figure out how the wiring goes to the interior light, that guy there, so that we can get that in place and functioning as well. I'm guessing that there's supposed to be a harness that just goes from this connector to the socket on the inside of the cab, but we don't have that either. Surprise. Okay. Here's our socket. That's going to go inside here. We got to clip it into this little bracket. Come on. Oh, there we go. Clickety click. Okay. So there we go. And I'm just going to feed these two out so we can ground the white one, and then we can tie in our red wire for the brake light. Okay. Maybe this ties into wiring off the interior light, and then when we send power to the interior light, it also is gonna, I don't know, we'll figure it out. Shit. Lens doesn't need to go on until the housing is mounted to the cab, which we gotta do first. So let's do that. Too high, too low, too slow. Okay, and I got the wrong screws, of course. Fuck's sake. Okay. So, the kit comes with new grommets for mounting the light, but I'm not going to put those on right now. I'm going to let Sean do that when he does the paint and body on this thing. Might actually have to dig up a schematic for this thing because I don't know how these connectors go, because the old light just has a socket, and then these two connectors here, there was a plastic connector on them that's been mangled and busted and lost, so I'm not quite sure how this would wire in to the harness for the interior light. Poop. Somebody that works with these things often is probably going, "You dumbass." I'm going to see if I can sort it out by looking at the harness itself, the old harness that's on the inside. Cue circus music. Got a plan of attack. So this is our ground. So I'm just going to put an eyelet on this, and then we can actually just use the cab itself. Basically, I'll use the screw to mount the interior light to the ground eyelet to the cab, and that's just going to go right there at the top. So no problem with that. I'm going to add in a red wire that's basically just going to be the same length as the dome light and cargo light harness. So that's going to be our brake input to this whole deal. And then I'm going to tie in to the orange wire, which is positive, to our cargo light. So I'm just going to tie in somewhere in this area here, and then I'm going to run a short harness in so that we can connect power to our cargo light. And then the ground for the interior light. The ground for the interior light, I'm going to do the same way. It's just going to be on an eyelet that's going to go to the cab itself, and then I just got the one wire from here for power to turn this thing on. So what I'm trying to do is feed the new harness kind of through that cavity in the cab. There's a gap between the roof skin and the inside panel here, down into the corner. Just use the other side. Look at that. There she blows. So we had our fish wire through. I'm just going to cut this old connector off just because we don't need it. I'll leave enough wires in case I need to reuse it. And now I'm going to attach the wires that I want to pull through with that. I'm going to make sure it's a decent wrap in case I have to pull kind of snugly. I'm going to bend that wire over. That through. Halfway there. Like Bon Jovi says, right? Oh, come on, you bitch. There we go. The wire we marked, even though it just told us which one goes up to the cab, it doesn't really matter because power comes in one terminal. It's going to close the contacts between the two and go to the switch. So you just plug in each of the connectors to the switch itself. That's going to go in there. Got a couple screws. They're not the right ones, but you know what? I don't have the proper screws, and I highly doubt that Sean does either. So if he doesn't like it, he can change the screws out later. There you go. Click, click. And I'll show you what I got going on the inside for the interior light. The way I did these connectors, the terminals, you can only hook up the negative to the negative and the positive to the positive. So that's what we're going to do. Come on. There we go. Oh, okay. I'm going to put a piece of tape around that so it doesn't accidentally touch ground. This isn't exactly the correct light for this. So we don't have a matching curvature to the roof. And the way it kind of goes, we only have one screw attachment hole that lines up exactly here. So I'm going to use that one for now. And we'll see how it mounts the housing. Should be good. There you go. Not too bad. We'll get the lens on. And then we'll just use some jumper wires to make sure that everything's still working the way it should. Cool. Tickety-boo. I have one jumper wire to the cab as a ground, and I have my other jumper wire here. There goes our brake light. And now if I change where my connector is hooked up, sorry, just fishing here. Okay, and that's the other thing. Turn my switch on. There we go. Working? There's my cargo light working. Nice. Tickety-boo. Now what's not happening is the inside light.